welcome back everyone to another episode of A Dash of Chaos. I'm super excited for this episode because I actually have a guest today. So it's going to be my first guest on the podcast. I've been doing this by myself. And also I'm actually recording an episode like a week and a half after the last one. So I'm actually on a decent schedule, I guess. Just to get right into it, my guest today is going to be Emily. So Emily, say hello.
Hi, everybody.
Where can everyone find you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm mostly on Twitter. This is the end. There's a bunch of underscores in there somewhere, so maybe you just look at the description.
Yeah, I'll put it in the YouTube description.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That's true, because like when I try to add you, I'm like,
Yeah. I'm like, I don't even know where the underscores are. I just guess. So it's cool.
Fair enough. So we are going to be talking about his Dark Materials, which is, I'm so excited because I knew that when I started this podcast, I was going to do a couple different episodes for his Dark Materials. So I did one, like it was like the second episode, which was kind of just like teasing into it, I guess. And obviously there's so much material to talk about when it comes to the series. So I'm really excited. And I just knew that I would have to have guests for it just because I just think it's such rich content that when you're discussing it with someone else, I just feel like the conversation's a bit better. I mean, I could talk about it for hours by myself, I really could, but I genuinely think it would be a lot more fun to do this with another person, which is why I asked Emily to be here. And I know Emily just like finished the series too and was very excited. Well, not just, but like recently finished it. So yeah, I'm just gonna like kind of go into kind of like the first question. I know this a little bit about you, but obviously the listeners don't know this, but like what made you first read it or watch it or whatever order you did it? Again, I know what order you did it in, but just kind of like explain your initial journey with it, I guess.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've been thinking about it for a while and I realized that the story's kind of crazy, like how I got here from when I started reading. But actually I got introduced going way back when the 2007 movie came out.
Yeah.
Like The Golden Compass. I think I saw it in theaters with like my grandma and just became obsessed. I was like 8 years old. And I didn't have any concept of like the major themes of the book. It was mostly like, oh my God, giant polar bear friend. That's amazing. And that's where I went with it. And I had a copy of the book and I never actually fully finished it now that I remember. I think I never, so like finding out about Roger was mind blowing to me because I just had no idea. Yeah. So that was the whole thing. And then I just never got around to finishing it, but it was definitely, I really liked it at that age. And then I picked it up again. Well, I found out about the show and I was really excited about the show.
Yeah.
And I think my friend got me the second book for my birthday. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to delve into this and see what it's all about. And like, I started from the beginning again.
Yeah.
And just fell in love with it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just completely fell in love with it. So it's great. I'm excited to be on the podcast because I haven't been able to really gush about it to anybody. Because there's just not a lot of people who have read it, I think. And it's like just such a good series. So I'm just excited.
I think what's crazy about that, like, and you bringing up that like not a lot of people have read it, is the thing is that it's like it's actually really well known, but it's kind of this weird thing where it kind of came out during that like Harry Potter period too. So obviously Harry Potter got such a like big following, and Lord of the Rings too, because of the like not the books, but obviously the movies came out around the same time. And I mentioned this in the first episode where I talked about it. It just kind of like fell in the background, which is really sad because I like when I read it, I was super young. I was like 10 or 11, and it was like my sixth grade teacher was just like, I was just like looking for something in the library. Like, you know, you're in elementary school, you get library time, whatever. And then she was just like, oh, like, you know, there's this really good book series. And I think you would enjoy it. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, whatever. Like, you know, when you're a kid and your teacher tells you like a book's good, you're like, yeah, of course it's going to be good. So then I like, you know, I got Northern Lights and then or Golden Compass. And then I just like like inhaled it basically. I was just like so in love with it. I actually finished, like I read this before I read Harry Potter. So like,
Oh wow.
you know, like I'm one of those like millennial kids that obviously like read Harry Potter, but like yeah, I fully read the series before I finished, like even picked up like the Philosopher's Stone. So it's just been so near and dear to me for then. And then I found out like so many people have actually read it or like know of it, but like it just never really had that kind of big time fandom thing. So it's kind of cool that like now it has this HBO BBC series and it's so well done. I couldn't ask for a better adaptation, and I'm kind of glad in a way that the movie didn't do well, because I don't hate the movie as much as most people do, but it's not a good adaptation. But I like, for me, because when I saw the movie in 2007 or 6, whatever it was, for me, it was just like, oh, I'm so excited because no one talks about the book, that like now there's a movie, so I can watch it. And I was like, so I like have like, I kind of have some love for it, even though I know it's not that great. But I don't know. So it's really cool now to kind of, I've reread the series maybe like 4 times, I'd say 4 or 5 times, just like periodically throughout. And I definitely get something more out of it every single time, especially because I was like getting older as I reread it. So like, obviously me reading it now versus as an 11-year-old, I'm going to see like a lot more than I did then. Yeah. But I don't think I was completely off base, but I just didn't fully understand what was going on.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting that you say that, because like, not to get opinionated, but like my view of the movie is very much like the watered down, like how my kid brain imagined it, because that was my first introduction, versus now it's like, whoa, there's all these major themes that I just didn't see before, because like I just didn't have the brain space for it yet, which is
and I think that's the thing too, like I wasn't that young when the movie came out, like I was in high school, but I was still young enough to kind of have that like, like nostalgia from reading it as a kid type thing. As a younger kid, I was still a kid then, obviously, but that like I didn't think that the movie was that bad, but it's pretty bad. Like in retrospect, it's pretty bad. Also, sidebar, just for everyone who's listening, I'm in a different room today, so it is very echoey. So hopefully it won't be too bad on the recording. I forgot to mention that, but now I'm hearing myself echo. So. But yes, anyway.
She's one of the angels. It's cool.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Anyway, back to the topic. But yeah, no, that's like awesome. Because I know you've told me before that like you had like half read the first book, sort of. And I can like, to me, it's like mind blowing that like someone would read part of it and not know like Roger dies at the end. Like that's, it's such a like huge moment in the books. And I think like even as a kid, like I definitely understood as a kid like how intense that was. Just like, I mean, because like it's the idea of like losing your friend and everything, but it's also the like, as I continue to reread the series, it's like, oh, recognizing like Lyra's guilt towards that is just like so different. Because in like as a kid, I was like, oh, like it's not her fault. Like I don't understand like why she would think it is and why it's like considered like a betrayal and everything like that. But like obviously as an adult, like I understand the layers of it now. So it's like totally. But yeah, okay, like, so is there like one particular moment in the book, because obviously like, so okay, wait, let me before I ask the question, so like you held off in watching season 2.
I did. Right? So I always read the book. I read the book before watching the show.
Okay.
I think, I was like midway through Amber Spyglass, I think, when I watched the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It was just to make sure I was asking my question properly.
Yeah, no, so you're good.
So just in terms of timeline, so then obviously you were reading the books first and then watching the show. Was there anything from the books like that wasn't sort of in the movie, I guess, because the movie did cut out like quite a bit, but was there something in reading the books now, the first book, that you were like super excited for to see in the show, other than polar bears? Because everyone, like, I think that's like everyone remembers that, like it's so iconic, like Yorick and everything with the polar bears, but other than polar bears, was there anything that like you were just like, oh, I can't wait to like really see this in the show?
I mean, it's interesting because actually, I know that you say it, I read Northern Lights / Golden. I'm an American. I say Golden Compass. I'm sorry.
No, it's Golden Compass in North America. It's just like in general, it's just the copy that I had was Northern Lights. So like, I didn't know any better until like I was like, oh, okay.
You can switch them. It's good. But yeah, I'm thinking, I honestly, reading the books and then watching the show, there wasn't really anything that I feel like it missed out on. Like, if anything, it just peppered in new details. And I don't think I've ever seen this in a show before, like an adaptation where they actually added to the story rather than subtracted, which I think is just insane. Like that one scene where Tony Costa, that's his name, like gets his ring.
Yeah, and they added
when he's
like the whole ceremony.
Settles.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, like that was really, it's like just so many little details. And then like Lord Boreal with the snake. You know what I really like? Because I was rewatching the second season. I'm on the first season right now.
Yeah.
But Lord Boreal, like he's just seems like this very, like he thinks he knows what he's doing, very much that character, I feel like. And then he goes into Will's world and there's just like, even though he's as you know, competent as he thinks he is, he walks in and there's a boot on his car.
Yeah.
And it's like he's just like, I don't know why, but like just little details like that really show off character.
Yeah.
Was good. Yeah.
I think like, and just to add to what you're saying, like it is one of, because first of all, with book series, I think the TV format, like this is the format that should be the adaptation. Obviously there was like all the movie adaptations of book series, and it's not like to say that they weren't good. I mean, some of them were good and some of them were bad, but like it's just, I mean, that's objective too. But I think just as a format, like the movie doesn't give you enough breathing space for all the details. But I don't think it's necessarily like, because my whole thing about adaptations, and I've like tweeted about this like a million times, is that adaptations are not about like getting every single detail from the original source material into like whatever medium, whether it's TV or movies. It's nothing to do with that, because like that doesn't work on screen. Like what you can do on like in a book or in any written form, like you can't necessarily do it on screen. And I understand that. So I'm never like, oh no, like they got rid of this thing or whatever it is. But I always find that it's what I find to be a good adaptation is that it captures like how you feel when you read the book, and you have the exact same feelings when you're watching it. And nothing's going to match up to what's in there, because no one's going to think exactly the way you do, and how they envision like a character or like a scene is going to be different, because like there's camera angles and costuming and like there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah.
So I'm never just like, oh no, this character doesn't look like the way I thought he looks like, or how they look like, because I'm just like, well, obviously, because like, you know, there's only so much description and then your mind fills it in. And I think with His Dark Materials, it's like they understood the assignment here. Like, you know?
Oh, definitely.
And which is really cool, because Jack Thorne wrote the entire first season, which is really impressive, because it's such a large scale story for only one writer to be on the writing team, and get it that like just the product that you got. And I've seen people kind of criticize the fact that there's a lot more like telling rather than showing. And I'm like, I do agree with that to some extent. There is a lot of like exposition sometimes, like characters are like explaining a lot, but I'm also just like, it's not like, it doesn't take away from it. I understand why, because it's just, Philip Pullman writes in this way where he kind of just drops you into scenes, and there isn't really like any introduction into it. So even with the first book, it actually starts with, you know, like with the Takai, and like Lyra's already there, like going into the cupboard. Start that in a show version or even a movie would be like, there's nothing there. Like, you don't know who this character is. There's no introduction. Whereas like what they added to the first episode was actually from, what is the book called? La Belle Sauvage, which is the first book from the new trilogy, the Book of Dust. That entire intro about the Great Flood and everything is actually from there. So
I did not know that.
Yeah, so
that's interesting.
Yeah, so they pulled from like a different source material, but still within the same universe. And then they were like, okay, this is like a good way to introduce it. And I love that, because it's like, it felt like very natural to start the story there, because then like like you don't know who Lyra is, but you have Asriel being like, this is Lyra, this is Lyra, and this is Pan.
He introduces,
right? Yeah, I know. And he's like, and here's Oxford during the Great Flood, and it's just like, it's so short, but it's enough. Whereas like Pullman, and this is the interesting thing about his Dark Materials too. His Dark Materials is meant to be read as one story, but like the publishers were like, no, you have to break it up into 3 books. So like he just really, like when you read it, it's supposed to really just flow into like one whole story. And I think I was worried for The Subtle Knife, because The Subtle Knife as a book is only it's my least favorite in the series, but not because it's bad, but it really does feel like a middle book, because it doesn't
it's like a
it
slump.
just because it literally, it just kind of ends and you're like, oh, nothing, like things obviously happen, but like it feels like that story wasn't complete, but it like continues on into the Amber Spyglass. So, but once you know that like he meant it to just be one whole story versus like, oh, each book kind of has like its own beginning to end, it makes it a lot more interesting. The new series is like that too. So
okay.
Yeah,
still gotta read that.
Yeah, the new series is really intensely like that, especially the second book, and so it just ends so abruptly again. And I was like, okay, it's different for me this time around, because I've never read his books while they were being published. So like when I finished The Subtle Knife when I was a kid, like the Amber Spyglass was already published, so I could just read it. Versus this time around, I'm like been waiting. So
actually, speaking of the endings for The Subtle Knife, the one thing I thought that the TV show did better than the book actually was how they handled Will's dad at the end.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because like that just, I don't know, spoilers, big spoilers.
Oh no, I already said this. Like the books have been around for 20 years. Like there's no spoilers. Yeah, there's no spoilers.
Little warning, but like in the books, he just like some random witch that he used to be in love with just like shows up out of nowhere and kills him. And I remember I like nearly threw my book across the room. Like that pissed me off so much. And I mean, like nothing against Philip Pullman. Like it makes sense. It like he needed to die in that scene. That was okay. But I did like that they made it like a magisterium soldier.
It's funny to me because
I think
I'm like half and half okay with it. I think like in terms of a TV show, it's a better death. Like I agree with it, because I'm like, oh yeah, like Magisterium was chasing them, and then like he's protecting his son and everything. But I'm like, like John Perry is a shit character, so like like I hate him so much that like I didn't really care for it, obviously, when I was a kid, but when I was a little bit older, when I read this series again, I think like when I was like 17 or 18, I was just like, yeah, fuck this guy. Like he deserves to die like that. I mean, because that's like the biggest thing about John Perry. And I think they did that really well. But obviously, and like, I was just like, I knew this was happening, and I knew it was going to happen because it's a TV show. Like you have to make this character somewhat empathetic, because it's just like, oh, like, like Will, like you have to feel bad like when he loses him. But I'm like, one of the biggest things that Pullman did in his series was like he pretty much was like, no, men kind of suck. So like like John Perry was like, he is the absent father, and he's supposed to be like this character that's like, oh, I was doing it for the greater good. And that scene in season 2 where he was like, no, your job was to be my father, like actor like Amir like knocked that out of the park. And I was like, I was like, I fucking hate you, John. Like I hate him so much.
There was that part of that scene where I think it was a very subtle thing, but I like had my jaw hit the floor when like I think they were having that argument, and then Will suddenly stands up and they're like dead set the same way suddenly. And I was like, oh, that's like a sign of him, like he's growing up and understanding what's going on. Like that was good. I was like, whoa. But
I think that's like one of the coolest things about both the characters, both Will and Lyra, is that they're allowed to be kids and not like, they do have the whole like, oh, we're being forced to grow up because of the situations we're in, but they have so much breathing room to be kids in the book series and in the TV show. It's a little bit harder in the TV show because obviously the actors are aging and they can't do anything about it. Like they've had to age up the characters because like production and everything of like they're way older in the TV show than they should be in the books. And I knew that was gonna happen. I was like, they can't make this.
Harry Potter.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of got used to it, right? But that was one of the biggest things I always appreciated. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to understand that's what's going on in the TV show, because I've seen some criticism of like, oh, why is Lyra like kind of so like defiant, or the way she is, like she's just kind of all over the place sometimes. And I'm like, well, no, because I'm like, she's supposed to have this breathing room to be a kid. So like when she goes into Will's world and like just runs off and gets hit by a car, it's because it's like she's very like, you know, wide-eyed and just wants to see everything. And I'm glad they kept it in. I know why like it's hard for people to like deal with that when they're a little bit older, because like they're like probably like 14, 15 in the show versus being like 11 and 12. But I'm glad they decided like that was important, because I thought that was important reading the books. And it's also just like important to all, like there's, okay, I don't even know how to get into, like now I'm segueing into something and then I realize it's going to be like a huge discussion, but it's like such a major theme about like growing up and free will and what that means, and everything about like what the story of the entire series is supposed to be. I don't know how much you've researched this series, because like I've been researching for like 10 15 years. Like,
that's right. You know more than me. I've watched a couple of interviews with the author, and that's
so I don't know if you know that like he literally read like Paradise Lost and was like, I want to do like, this is my version of it.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
But he does it like on the opposite end, because it's like, again, this is spoilers, but like whatever, because his whole idea was that like, here's like this biblical story of like the fall of man, and how do I like rework it, which is the and this is in the actual series, but like, you know, like Eve and everything. So he was literally like he literally was like, what's the most like the biggest like sexist story in the world? And it's literally like the story of creation. And he was like, I'm gonna flip that around. And a lot of that came from like, because he had read Paradise Lost and how it was giving like a different perspective to like Satan. He was like, I'm gonna give a different perspective to like the creation story and like Adam and Eve. Like that was his.
That's so cool. See, that's interesting, because like that's something I noticed in Amber Spyglass at least. But like as far as the growing up, like Will and Lyra finally having their demons settled, that was basically a choice for them. Like I like everything, I mean not everything, but like even after having to deal with Mrs. Coulter and Lord Asriel and like all these people telling her, and she's always like, don't tell me what to do. That's like a huge thing throughout the whole thing. And there's a quote at the end with Will where he's like, don't tell me what to do, because I need to do it myself, like for my whatever my destiny is. And I think that was such a big thing, especially now that you say like the Eve story.
I think like obviously free will and choice is such a major theme, like one of the biggest themes, if not like the theme of this series, which is interesting too, because I feel like, I don't know, like I said, because I've read it at so many different parts of my life, and also like everyone, if anyone knows me, I'm like, my relationship with the Catholic Church is like not great. So like as that relationship like crumbled, I was continuously reading this with like, it was like it kind of started meeting in the middle, where it's like the more that I like separated myself from like religion and like my beliefs, I started to understand the book series more, because I was just like, oh, because I didn't like, as a kid, I you know, even if I wasn't like really intensely into like, or intensely religious, it was part of my life. But once it stopped being a part of my life, I could like see a bit more clearly what was being said. So it was just kind of like, like that's why his Dark Materials, like I always say this, like, and it's funny, like Dark Materials is like my whole soul, like literally, like, every journey that I've had, like those books have been with me throughout it. So it's just like it's so much fun to go back to it, and now for there to be a TV show that people are into, like, oh my god, anytime I see any of like my mutuals are like, I'm finally starting his Dark Materials, I'm like, thank god,
like let's go.
Like, there's so much I want to talk about. I'm like tweeting to myself, I'm like, does anyone else want to watch this show? And I'm like, please just watch it for me. Like, I promise you'll like it. And it's so many, the problem is so many people are like, oh, I want to read the books first. I'm like, you actually don't need to. And I said this like a million times to people, and they're like, yeah, but like usually, I'm like, yeah, but like I'm telling you, like you don't actually have to like read the books first. But it does, it obviously, like, you know, when you've consumed both of them, especially because of what they've added to it, it makes it like, it's such a good experience. God,
you could take away most of the stuff from the book, probably everything from the books in the show. So
no, 100%. And like they've done just like I will literally like die on a hill and be like, this is the best book to series, like TV series adaptation I've seen so far. I mean, not that I've watched all of them, but like, you know, I've watched a fair few of like book adaptations to movies or TV shows, and I'm like, they just got it. They like understood it to like a T, and they knew exactly what they needed to do and what they could add in to still feel like it's very much within the world of like Philip Pullman's original material. So I'm just like I'm a happy fan. That's all I gotta say.
I don't know who this Jack Thorne guy is, but he's a powerhouse. I gotta say.
Okay, you know what's really funny? Okay, let me explain to you who Jack Thorne is, because this is actually quite funny, and you'll be really, really surprised at who he is. So did you ever watch the show Skins?
I haven't heard of it, no.
Okay, so it's this. Okay, so when I was in high school, I was like really into British TV, so I only watched British TV for the longest time. So it was basically this like teen show that was like from 2007 to like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years after that. So he was like one of the main writers on there. But what most people know him for now is he wrote Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which so like
wow.
So and obviously like I don't know if you've read it, but like or know that like people didn't react well to it, and it's not very good. So like when he was chosen as the writer for the show, I was like, oh, like I didn't know. I was like, I don't know if I want him to be the writer, because I was just like, I know he can write really good TV, but I was like, the last thing I read from him was The Cursed Child, so I was just like,
okay.
I was like, great. And then they were like I said, he's the only writer for season 1, so I'm like, okay, this is like all on him. So like if this sucks, like this is literally all on him. So
it's terrifying.
But yeah, he did really I like, you can tell it's a passion project, and he said this in interviews like that's what I love about like everyone who's created, like helped to create this show, whether it's the actors, the crew, the writers, all of them are just very much like, I love the book so much, and which is insane, because it's like Ruth Wilson hadn't read the books until she got the part.
Oh wow.
Which is like
she can we talk about Ruth Wilson?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god.
You'd think that had read it, you'd think she had known it for years.
Yeah.
And had read it before, because James McAvoy was like, yeah, I've read them like 4 or 5 times. Like, I love this series. Same with Lin-Manuel, like he had read them before. And he wrote a song in The Heights that's based on his Dark Materials as well. So yeah,
I have so much today.
I know, I have so much trivia. No, it's just funny because I'm the reason why I'm mentioning that is because I'm going to watch the In the Heights movie today. So,
okay.
Yeah. So yeah. But anyway, no, Ruth Wilson and Daphne Keane, which is hilarious too.
Oh my god.
Both of them hadn't read it until they got the parts, which is incredible considering like they've done so well.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Ruth Wilson. Okay.
Ruth Wilson.
Done. Like that's a whole topic itself. But with Ruth Wilson, I already was so when Nicole Kidman was in the movie, I was always like, this is the perfect casting. Like I can't imagine anyone else like playing.
She did great. She did do in the movie. She did really good.
Yeah. So then like, obviously, like I had seen Ruth Wilson in other things before, so I was like, oh no, she's a great actress. Like I don't have a doubt of her doing well, but I was just like, in my mind, I'm like, Mrs. Coulter is Nicole Kidman. Like, like as much as I like don't really like the movie, I just thought that casting was so great, and like in my head, I'm like, yeah, like this is the only version of her, like, you know, that I see now, so it's fine.
Yeah. But
then like Ruth Wilson showed up and I was like, oh, okay.
Okay. Just her little mannerisms are so on point. Like I think because I saw there was an interview with her and she's like, yeah, I needed to be monkey.
Yeah.
Like,
and
it's
that
like
was
the
like her
monkey brain. Yeah, and it's like she totally nailed that. It's like, yeah, I can't unthink that now.
And that was such a cool thing too, because I didn't like, I'd watched some interviews too, and I didn't realize that that wasn't like necessarily written into the script. That was something that she kind of like figured out on her own, that she needed to do. And I was like, this makes so much sense, like to the character. And I never would have envisioned the character acting like the Golden Mummy, because like that's such a genius way to connect like her demon with her when they're so disconnected. Like I thought that was so smart, because like obviously like you can see it in the show, but in the books it's even like less so, because like you're reading it, so you're not really like seeing them interact on screen. You're just sort of seeing her like talk at him, right? So what is that like, how does that translate on screen? Like this was incredible, like and then for her to have those like monkey mannerisms, fucking genius. Like
it makes me think it's like the whole, because she's trying to get away from her demon, her you know, her true self or whatever, and it's like it's just that whole idea of like you can't really escape it no matter how much you try, right?
Yeah,
that's like kind of my takeaway from it.
No, exactly. And
yeah, it's so interesting.
Such another layer, which is like, oh my gosh, I wish you've read the other books, because there's a lot of stuff that kind of adds more to her character. There. Like she's not even in the series, but she's like present in it, which is fantastic, because like that's how great her character is, because it was like, even though she's not there, like her presence is so like felt in the new series. Not in the first book, because the first book is like a prequel, but like actually in the first book too, but like more so in the second book, because a lot of what happens in the second one, it's just like mind-blowing, because everything you thought in the first series was so like intense and like tragic or whatever, like they start explaining like what the rest of the world was doing as well while all of this was happening, and you're just like, oh yeah, like there was a whole other world. Like the whole rest of the world
just happening.
Was kind of existing. Sorry, I'm just gonna get some water.
No, you're good.
I'm like losing. Yeah.
No, it's good.
But
I was gonna say, even just like where she goes into the like when you think that she has done the worst thing imaginable, she just ups the ante each time. It feels like. And I have in Amber Spyglass, again, spoilers, but that the scene with her and Azrael and Metatron at the end. I want to hear your thoughts on that, because I read that like 4 times and I still, in my brain, I don't even really believe that it happened. It's like that's like that disbelief of like, did that really just happen? Oh my God. Like,
I think so. One of the things that like I've discussed over the years with like other people who have read the books and who are fans of the books, it's always like the ever-ending debate of like, who's the worst parent? And I'm like, it's Azrael. Like, why are we talking about, like, to me it's so obvious that it's Azrael, and it's because of that scene, honestly.
Okay.
Because, and as a kid, how do I explain this? As a kid, I was like kind of really sad that like Marisa did what she did, because I was just like, oh, like I don't know, like in my head, I think, and that's just because of like the stories you've read previously. Like in my head, I was like, oh no, she's gonna like have a redemption arc type thing.
Yeah, that's
right?
Interesting. Okay.
Like as a kid, I thought that, because I'm like, oh, like, you know, like, and then as I got older, I was like, still thinking that, like as a teenager, I was like, I still don't get like why this is what happened, and like why this would be the end of that character, or like that was her entire arc. Because like in my mind, I'm like, why weren't either of these characters like redeemed? Like it just it was weird to me. And then like when I reread it in my 20s, I was like, oh, I get it. Like like, I was like, oh, like these people are like awful, right? Like
see, that's so interesting, because like when I was little and read it, like I straight up had nightmares about Mrs. Coulter. Like that was she was like the big scary monster under my bed.
Well, she is.
And then, like weirdly, I still, like, don't get me wrong, she's a terrible person. I do not condone any of her actions, but like I weirdly got like I don't know. I kind of wanted to give her a hug at the end, but also she's a terrible person. So it's this weird thing.
And like, not to be like, because because obviously in real life, like I would never be the person to say this, but like as a character, like obviously the world that she exists in and the world that women exist in, like Lyra's world, it's like rough. Like it's rough for them. So like as an adult, I was kind of like, yeah, this makes sense. And I think one of the biggest things that changed for me, I love that like whole speech she had where she was basically like, oh, like I had to make sure like he couldn't find any like love in my heart. So like I could protect Lyra. Like
that's right.
Yeah, that to me was just so like complicated because it was like because she loves Lyra, she's able to show that she doesn't. And she's able to hide it. Like, and that to me is super complicated. And it's also just, and this is, oh my God, like the scene that they added in season 2 between Lee and Maria.
Yes.
This is what like, I'm so glad they added that because it really kind of nails it on the head of like who Marisa is as Lyra's mother and how like it doesn't matter that she loves her, like it doesn't change anything else that she's done. She's done all of these horrible things, but like it's because she loves her that she's able to do these horrible things. And then like, and the facts of that,
so twisted.
Like, yeah, it's so messed up. And for them to like sacrifice themselves the way they did, right at the end with Metatron and everything, like literally like jumping into the abyss and like taking him down and all that stuff. I was just like, yeah, that's the least you could have done after everything. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I just can't wait to see it in the show. Like because they, you know, they did a little hint of it too in season 1 because they had that scene of her like walking on the ledge.
Oh my God. Oh, I just connected that. Oh my God.
So they and then she was like, oh, I always have the urge to jump. Like they did that whole thing. And I remember when I watched the show the first time and I got to that scene, I was like, oh my God, this is such a great like foreshadowing, but like it's so tiny, like it's so small. But like and they have her like on the edge, but like if you don't know what happens, it just kind of seems like she's unhinged, which like most of the time, like she is.
Yeah.
But if you know what she does at the end, that scene is so great.
That just connected in my brain. I'm having a moment.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I just like it clicked for me immediately. Like when she was like, yeah, like I always have the urge, like heights always scare me. I always have the urge to jump. I was like, okay, we're like going into this like season 1. Fantastic. Like we're gonna go. I'm glad you didn't notice it because then we can talk about that.
Well, because I hadn't read Amber Spyglass when I watched the first show, so it didn't. Yeah, now that you say it, it totally makes. Oh my gosh, yeah. There's just so many little things that you can go on. It's I mean, I know this was a question for later, but what are you excited about for what we're gonna see for the next season? Because I mean, I have a list.
I have like the whole thing. Can I say the whole thing? Obviously, well, the Land of the Dead is like I can't wait to see just how they do it. Because in my head, I don't know. In my head, I just imagine like what the underworld looked like in Hercules, like the Disney Hercules film. So like I can't get it out of my mind that it's gonna look like that, and I know it's not going to. Like logically, I know it's not going to, but I'm just like. I'm so curious to see how they actually do that on screen and like what their version of the Land of the Dead is. And the like, there's so much. I don't even like. I can't wait to like see like the like. I know we saw like the outlines of the angels, but I can't wait to see like them interacting and like with the angels. I'm kind of okay. Here's the thing. I'm kind of sad that they went with like classic angels because. There was an opportunity there, like, because you know how like on the internet they always have like all the memes about like what people think angels look like, but what they actually look like. I was like, you could have gone with that. That would have been great.
Like the biblical, like with the rings and stuff. That could have been really cool.
Yeah, but I understand why they did it. That's also a lot of CGI, so like I get it. Like, But I am really
Actually, it's
excited.
funny because when I was reading The Amber Spyglass, like each page I turn, I'm like, man, it seems like Philip Pullman deliberately made the CGI's team like they're just kind of a bad time. Like
exactly.
Yeah,
Right? Like as
like,
the Amber, like as you continue to go on and as they continue to go to different worlds, you're just like, oh my god, like this is such a big scale season because there's so many like different, not even characters, but like species. I know which one you're excited for, but like of things that are introduced that like you're just like, oh, how are they gonna do this? Which is why like I had to send you like, I was like, look, there's like the lever right there. Like
is that how you say it? Mulfa?
I don't know.
I don't know. We're gonna find out.
It's probably Mulfa that actually makes more sense. But
I'm thinking like a pack mule.
Yeah, but I've always said Malefa because, like, I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, who knows? But so that's funny that you bring that up because I just remembered as part of like how I got back into his Dark Materials.
Yeah.
So I worked in Yellowstone 2 summers ago. I was doing field research, and I was working on. We had like these plots out in the Mar Valley, and there was this one. I swear this is getting somewhere. There was this one antelope, like a pronghorn. That would just hang out by our plots all day and just watch us work. And like we kind of just like got to know. He just like sat there and just like watched us, and we were like, okay, freeloader. Like we would just talk to him like that. And one day my boss was like, oh, he totally makes me. He reminds me of the Mulfa. And I'm like, what's that? And she was like, oh, it's from his Dark Materials. It's like,
oh my god,
read it. Yeah,
that's amazing.
So, like, and she was like, yeah, it's like these creatures that are spineless and their legs are messed up and they wheel around. And I'm like, what? like what do you mean? What is that? What? And I'm like, that's in that book that I read when I was a kid. So then I jumped into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the Mulfa. Just like he obviously took a lot of time to think about the ecosystem of that world and like how everything kind of worked together in harmony. And I feel like it just worked with the dust so well because like that's kind of the place where they discover how important dust is and like what it does.
Yeah.
And like what so I'm so excited for that. We saw the little CGI like head on the set and I lost it. Yeah, I'm so excited.
Yeah,
it's gonna be so good.
It's like, I don't know, like I understand that they filmed season 3, but I still can't wrap my head around the fact that there's going to be like something I can watch of the Amber Spyglass. Like even with season 2 coming out, even with season 1, because like in season 1 they added Will in, so this is the first time I was seeing Will Perry like as a person. But just like even with The Subtle Knife, I was like, I can't believe I'm gonna like watch this, because I was like, obviously we've had the movie already, so I was like, okay, I'm kind of used to having an adaptation of The Golden Compass, but to like get into The Subtle Knife, I was like, this is crazy, like there's so much. But now knowing like next year there's gonna be the Amber Spyglass, and there were talks that they were gonna split it into 2 seasons, and I was kind of hoping they would, but they didn't, and I was like, it's fine. But
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like, there's so many things. Like, yeah, like obviously, yeah, like I said, landed that the whole scene with Marisa and Azrael at the end. Like, it's gonna be epic, right? Like, it has to be. Like, it just, I'm just wondering how they're gonna film that. But then like even the small ones, like I don't know. Like, am I gonna be able to get through the bench scene? I don't know.
Oh god, the bench scene.
I just don't know. Like, and then they did that in season 2 as well. Like, they hinted, and I was like, that's just rude. Like, for anyone who knows, I was like, why would you do this to me? And the funny thing was like, I hadn't watched the episode yet, but I like on my timeline, someone had posted it, like a screenshot of it, and I was like, okay, first of all, this is an attack. Like, on everyone, not just me personally, but like anyone who has read the book series. This is like, they did that on purpose to like fuck with you.
Yeah, it's like, this is coming, remember?
Yes. And then secondly, I was like, how dare you? I just couldn't believe, but at the same time, it was like, again, like if you've not read the books, like you have no clue, but it's still like such a good scene that you're like, oh, okay, like that's a really sweet scene between the 2 characters.
Oh, totally.
But like, it's also like foreshadowing of like everything.
That's interesting, because like I knew that bench equals bad, when I was reading through and watching the show, just because of, well, your reactions and other people's and stuff. But like, I didn't really have like a concept. So I was like, oh, that's nice. And then I was sitting in a park bench when I read the
I know you
Untitled
did.
scene,
Yeah,
which
you
was
did
a
say.
really dumb idea. Oh my
God.
God.
But if you don't know it's coming up, then it's not really.
Yeah. Well, see, but I should have known, because I heard you guys being like, and I just didn't occur to me. And I was like, I was a mess for the rest of the day. I was like, oh my God.
I just remember, I think that was also like one of those moments as a kid that this series, like, I don't want to say it defies expectations, but it kind of did, in that whole, like, it is a happy ending, but it's not like at all. Like, it is though, because like of what they've done, that like where the world is at that point. It's a happy ending, which but it's not your typical, like, I guess, I don't want to say fairy tale ending, but it's not your typical like ending for that like genre. But that was like the biggest thing. And I don't even want to say like, oh, that genre for kids, because Philip Pullman's biggest thing is like, you shouldn't disregard like kids and what they can read. Like, you shouldn't be like, oh, this book is only for kids, or like a kid won't understand this. Like, that's like one of his biggest things as a writer, is that he never disregard what children like know and what they understand, which obviously you can tell from the way he writes his characters.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, just like Lyra with her alethiometer. It's
exactly totally right. Like that, like exactly. It's literally like, oh, she knows the truth. Like, and then obviously at the end she like loses her ability as she's growing up. Like he like literally is saying like, you lose shit as an adult. Like, you actually become less.
You have to learn how to be a kid again in some ways. I love that it ended like that. I have to say that she has to relearn everything. That was like, so especially like after now I'm out of college and stuff, I'm kind of like seeing that myself.
That's what I mean, right? Like, as a kid, the end of this book series doesn't seem very much like a happy ending. But as an adult, when you've gone through like different parts of your life, and you now start to understand like, oh, I'm an adult now, and like all this stuff that I missed from like my childhood, or I wish I could like have like the same thought process that I did as a kid, because it's a little bit easier sometimes. Like, it makes you appreciate like what happens at the end. It's just that like them as characters like don't understand exactly how it's going to affect them, but that's what this new series is about, because like you actually like see Lyra as an adult and kind of the repercussions of everything. But yes, so like I was basically like the new series talks about Lyra as a 20-year-old, like she's like 20, 21. But yeah, my whole point basically was that like, obviously the ending of it is not really a happy ending, but like as an adult you do realize that it is like the most realistic happy ending. And actually now it's like reminded me to talk about something, because it's like I feel like one of the biggest things that like a lot of people were upset about was that fact that like Will and Lyra like can't be in the same world at the end. Well, what was your reaction to that?
That it weirdly, okay, this is controversial.
I know.
But I mean, again, the bench scene is heartbreaking. Like it hurts. But weirdly enough, I was expecting it to hurt more than it did. I was like oddly at peace with everything. Like, it kind of made sense that they had to go back. Like, it would have been interesting to explore like Will living in Lyra's world, but I don't know if it would have worked the other way around. And like, it just, I don't know. There was something, and like the fact that he had Mary as a friend to talk to about all of his experiences, because otherwise he would have had to keep that secret probably to his grave. Nobody, I don't know, maybe somebody would believe him, but God knows. I mean, so yeah, I was more at peace with it than I expected to be, and it still feels weird. I think like as a kid I was sad about it, but then because this is like something that changed for me. Like, one of my least favorite like writing tropes is like soulmates. I hate it so much. Like, I hate it so much. So like, since that like changed for me, like I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Because like also one of the biggest things is like they meet because of like prophecy and because of circumstance. Like it like there's a reason they are like where they are and like why they meet. So like logically, like with my thought process of like, oh, it's all about free will and choices, and which is our like the themes, like it doesn't actually make sense for them to
like be able to stay in the same world, because like they were brought there kind of like against like their own will. They didn't just like decide like, yeah, we're gonna
We're gonna go on this adventure.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like kind of like one of the biggest, I guess, like when you talk about like chosen one stuff, which is great because like
Yeah.
that's like one of the biggest things is like, oh, like, you know, if there's like the chosen one, it's like whatever the opportunity or whatever their like quest or adventure or whatever it is like presented to them. There's a lot of times where they kind of like the characters will just sort of like accept it and are not like really questioning it anymore, and they're just like, oh, it's like, you know, we have to continue on from there. And that was like one of the biggest ones for this was like Lyra, like obviously she accepted what was happening to her, but it wasn't easy ever. It was just kind of like like you know what I mean, because it's just like, oh yeah, I have to do all of this stuff, and it's like, oh look, I got my like best friend killed, like, you know what I mean, like it's just like,
it's like there's some consequences to it.
Yeah, and there's like
heavy consequences.
Yeah, immediate consequences like by the end of the first book with that. And again, that's what I thought was so cool about this series, and probably just ruined every other series for me in the end, because you know, like when everything's like so tied up in like a neat little bow, which is not a bad ending. That's not like me like criticizing that. It's just, you know, when you have something as complicated as the way this series ended, or even how each book kind of like ended to some extent, it kind of changes your perspective of like certain like story, like character arcs and like story arcs, which is, I didn't think I'd be able, I knew I was going to mention it, but this is like why I like Warrior Nun too. So like,
it makes sense to bring up Warrior Nun. It's the Catholicism, man.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's funny because I remember when I was watching it last year, Warrior Nun last year, I was like, I can't believe I get to have Warrior Nun and his Dark Materials at the same time. Like I just I mean, like there's obviously a lot of crossover there, so like it was and yeah, just in terms of storytelling, I'm not going to talk about that because if I start talking about that, then
that's a whole other thing.
It's a whole other conversation. But yeah, so like one of the biggest things with this series is like I always felt, and I appreciate it more now seeing it like as a TV show too, and knowing like how that ending is going to happen, and with like the bench scene and everything. Like, yes, I was way more sad about it when I was younger, and now that I'm older, I'm like, no, this is like the right ending to the story, and it makes a lot of sense, and everything that they learn from each other is really kind of the more important thing, is because like they were like thrown into this whole thing, and they were just like kids, literally, like they're just kids, and they have to do this entire thing to save the world essentially. And but the biggest thing is that they go away from it understanding that how important each other was to like their lives and their like development. And it's really cool that it's almost like, I don't know, I don't want to say like it's happy, but it's like it's almost just kind of like a relief that's kind of that ending. Like you were saying, like, oh, you're like, you felt at peace with it. Like I understand that now, because it does.
Because I'm thinking like with those kind of like when they were like, we're gonna kill God, and I'm like, this cannot go well at all. Like this is not gonna be good. And like the fact that, well, they got out with their lives. I know that's like kind of dark, but it's like that's something. It could have not happened that way. And also like I feel like it's like, okay, their destiny's done, and now they kind of just get to live their life. They have all this time now that maybe they weren't expecting to get. You know, and like they're these changed people. So I think, and the fact that they, like I said before, how they got to choose, like even though it was destiny, they got to choose it themselves, and that was such a big thing. Of like that whole thing after Mary tells them the story. That's my favorite part of the entire thing, is just Mary playing the serpent. I thought that was so interesting that like Mary playing the serpent is just the act of expressing a story that came from her and giving it to another person. That's something where I'm like, I'm gonna be like 40 and I'm still gonna be like, oh my god, that's insane. Like that's
and I think and like I was saying, like whatever it was, like an hour ago, but yeah, just like his reworking of the creation story, and everything that you, or like what people know of the creation story and what they consider good and evil in that part, and what like humanity like is supposed to learn from that creation story. It's like how it's like twisted in this version, or not twisted, how it's like reworked in this version is really cool. And yeah, it's the same thing too, because like when you're reading the books and or even just watching the show and they're like, oh Mary, like you have to play like the role of the serpent, like in your mind, because of if you know like the creation story, you're like, oh no, like
That's not
like
good.
it's not gonna be good. And like also obviously the series is like we need to prevent the fall, but it's like it's such a cool idea that like Lyra is like the new Eve and is gonna like and is gonna like have the same role of like the fall of man, but it's like a good fall, like it's like in like it's supposed to happen in this way, and it's like the better version of it, because and it is really like twisting that misogyny, because like the entire creation story is the idea that like men are the way they are because like women failed, like that's literally like right, and it's all their fault.
Oh totally.
Right?
And it's like it's the fact that it's like in the perspective of the magisterium too, like this is still just as bad. Even though we see it from like, you know, Lyra's perspective and it's like actually a very healthy, good thing. But then like to them, it's like, I mean, it's the story of a nun losing her faith and then falling in love with somebody, right? So like that's like the worst thing that's like of all of that, you know. And it kind of bleeds into Warrior Nun a bit.
I know, right?
Not gonna go down that road. But
that's what I mean. Like it was weird that the two shows were going on at the same time. I was like, wait a minute. Like,
that's so wild.
Yeah,
that's definitely why Mary's my favorite character, I think. I gotta say.
Such a good character. I think my favorite character is definitely going to be like Mrs. Colt. It has been for years. Honestly, she's like she's honestly like probably my favorite literary character, like period, not just like from this series. Like she's always just been so like stuck in my mind. Like how could you not read that character and be like, holy crap, like
whoa,
there's so much to her, and there's so like once you read it there's so much more that you're gonna learn, and you're just like okay. And
that's because I feel like that's somebody who it's like you could analyze her for years and years and years and still like barely scratch the surface of like her psychology. I feel like
I think it's like there's in terms of just like not just her, but like just the topic of like women in the series and feminism and what that means in this series is so complicated. And one of the biggest things that like I have like tweeted about too is that like one of the for Lyra is that like she has like so much internalized misogyny in the books. In the show they don't show it as well, like and it's because it's like you can't hear like her inner thoughts of how she like thinks, like what her thoughts are about other women in the series. But like that's like one of the biggest things about her as a character is that like she has to like unlearn all of that, because like she's grown up around men, so she respects them whether she like understands that or not, because it's like when she meets, even when she meets like Marisa or when she meets like Mary, like or even Ma Costa, like there's certain things that's really conflicted. There's this really cool thing in the book where she's always like, oh, like don't call me a girl, like I don't want to be like considered a girl, like from the other kids, like when she's playing with like the other kids.
That's right.
But then when she goes into Will's world and he like gives her like pants to wear, and she's literally like, oh, I can't wear pants, like I'm a girl. I was like, that's such a like complicated thing that where like it, you know, she doesn't understand like her own internalized misogyny, that she like just says these things. And it's a really cool thing that's actually in the books, because that's all part of it too. It's like when you grow up in a world where they're basically telling you like to the max, like obviously it happens in our world too, but like women are lesser. How does that affect you? And what I like is like when they added the scene between Mary and Marisa in the show.
I was just going to bring that up.
That's one of the criticisms I've always had of the series, the book series, was that like obviously he has all this commentary on how women are treated, but it would have been cool to see more women interact, because then they could like talk about that and like and how they feel about that. But I also am just like, I felt that was like Pullman also just like, I can't write these conversations properly, like if I don't get that either. So like I understand why he didn't write it, but I also wish that they had done a bit more of that in the series. Just in the book he had done a bit more of that in the series, so it was really great that in season 2, they were like, oh, we're gonna put this scene between them. I was like, oh my god, this is like exactly what like the type of stuff that I wanted, because then you see these conversations between like basically like two mother figures, sort of like not really, but like yes, and then you just kind of see their perspectives of like their careers, and the funny thing is like in context, like Mary feels like she's still obviously being looked down upon, and like, you know, they're not trusting her work and like etc. But it's like so many leaps and bounds above like what Marisa can do in her own world, that it's just like it's this really interesting level of like understanding like their privileges within their own like social circles, and the way their societies work, because it's like technically what they both do, like if you're just looking at it objectively, is the same thing, right? Because they're both like scholars at Oxford and everything like that. But like it's such a commentary on like where like if institutions have that much control, then like is that actually a privilege? And it's like yes and no, because like it really depends on like what else is going on. But it's such a cool, and that was crazy because that was like in the 90s, right? So like,
I guess so. So
and I like obviously it was relevant then, but I feel like it's like even more relevant now. Like, you know?
It's still relevant.
I
think it's so interesting. Like with that scene, I think I loved it so much just because, like, well, like you said, like both of those characters were so disarmed by each other. So it was like such an interesting conversation, but also like just specifically Mrs. Coulter. I don't think I've ever like had that feeling of like, because she always seems to know like exactly where everybody's social statuses are in the room, you know, and like what's going on, and like she just seems on top of her game constantly, and that's like the first slip. I feel like maybe not the first, but it was like a real slip.
But that's such a great moment that it's like she slips around like another woman, like she's able to like, you know, keep her composure around men, like she can control it, like that's the whole thing, like she controls the room, like she knows she controls everyone, and like you know, like there's that great scene, I think it's in season 2, she's like, all I see are like men failing, like, you know, like that whole thing. But like in this one like small scene, like both of them are, like you said, like they're both very disarmed by each other, and it is really one of the very few moments where you see like Mrs. Coulter slip up, and she's just like, she just doesn't know how to deal with it, like because she hasn't.
So interesting.
Because women in her world aren't like that, so it's like and it's like there's I love that that was a very much needed scene that like enhances the series, and I'm glad they added it, and this is such a testament to like I think I've told you this, that like in season 1 it was only Jack, but then he brought in 4 other women to be writers on the writing team, so it was him and 4 other women in season 2, and honestly it's super obvious, like it's super obvious when you think
now that
about,
you say that, because there's a lot of scene with women. There's more of that going on.
And it's not even just like, oh, there's more scenes with women, it's like how they're written. It's not that he like did a bad job in season 1, but it's just like it's better in season 2, and it's just like, oh, there's 4 more women on the writers team where you're like, yep, that checks out, like
definitely.
And that's like, I'm glad that, you know, he didn't have an ego for that and was like, oh, like I need to write the rest of it. He was just like, no, like I'm gonna add more people to the writer's team, like I did my passion project for the first season, now it's like we have to like enhance like and continue to expand the world. And I like, it doesn't even surprise me that like, because it's a bigger writers team, that there's all these little added tidbits, not necessarily just with the female characters, but like in general. That just means there's more collaborative work to kind of like decide, oh, you know, we should add this, or like maybe we can do this. And that's the great thing about having like a writer's room, like you're supposed to like bounce off each other. So
oh totally, that's awesome. I'm even thinking like even like how Lyra interacts with Will. I don't know, I feel like I don't know, it's just like a gut feeling. I feel like definitely a woman's perspective is helpful in that.
You know what I mean. Like it feels more, I guess, natural. That's such a weird way to say it, but like it's such a smooth way of how they interact with each other. It's like one of the coolest things too, and this is such a testament to Pullman's writing, is that when he introduced Will, because Will is obviously not in the first book, but he's in the first season, they decided to like add him to the first season. But when he added him to the second book, they became equal protagonists, which is really freaking hard to do when you've had like established like original protagonist, because there, you already know that your audience is like, okay, but like we're with Lyra, this is Lyra's story, how do you bring in another character and then make you care about both of them equally, and also that they have equal parts in this story. Like there, that's what I also loved about this series. Like you never felt like one of them was just like lesser than the other in terms of writing. Like it was very much like collective journey, but they were also having their individual developments, and it was so well done to do that. And like the show understood that in the like simplest of ways, because like they literally in the opening credits have their names at the same time, and I was like,
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so like, you know, you like in the season 1 when they had the credits, they had just like Daphne Keane as like the opening one, but like when they did season 2, they had both of them as like, and that usually doesn't happen in TV credits either. Like you always just have like protagonist 1 and then like the slightly lesser like protagonist, but like they understood that like this is both of their stories, and I thought that was a really cool thing that they added for like the opening credits. I was like, oh, like I wasn't expecting it, and it was just such a small thing that they did, and I was like, sweet, like
no, totally,
and that's and then like obviously like Into the Amber Spyglass, like it is such their story, even when they're like separate and doing other things, like everything, you don't ever feel like you're too focused on Lyra or you're too focused on Will. Like there's so much balance between those two characters and the stories and their individual stories and how it comes together. That I've always loved that about the series too. That was something that I was always just like, oh, I wish like other writers could do this, because like other books that I love, like I'm always just like, oh, I wish I knew more about like this character who like is always there, but like you still don't know enough about them. But with this book series, I never felt like that. I was just like, oh, I really got like all like their whole arcs. And
I'm thinking it's like going back to how Will is introduced so early. I feel like they like that helped with that, and then also just like from a writing perspective, like I don't know if you tried to write it that way with that kind of time skip where you're going back and forth, like you could, but I don't know if it would be the same. It's like it works for the TV screen so well that they did it the way they did, I think. And this really like fleshed out Will's character too.
And this is what I was saying like at the beginning about in terms of adaptations, like it's not about, you know, getting every exact scene on screen to be there. Like you can cut things out, but it's even more impressive when you add things. Like it's 10 times more impressive when you add stuff. Like obviously you might cut stuff out, but if you can add anything and it feels very much like, oh, like this doesn't feel disruptive, but then you are recognizing that it's a new scene, like you get it, like you understand like how you've slotted these two characters, like to even get Lee and Mrs. Coulter in a scene together, like that's like you had to rework some stuff to do that. But like I would have been like, oh man, like I would have loved to have read that like when I read the series. So it's cool that it's like uniquely there for the TV show as well, because like the books don't feel less without that scene, but like they just feel like so much more in the TV show. So it's like it's really cool. And they haven't like, I feel like they didn't add too much, but like everything that they did add was just like, it was definitely worth like seeing on screen. That's why
it was all well thought out. I remember, didn't you say there was like a bonus episode they never filmed? I'm so curious what was on that. Like I wish I knew. So it was supposed to be one whole episode of like Azrael basically, and you were gonna see what he was doing during the Solo Knife, like so like he's trying to like gather the angels and like everything like that. So they weren't able to film it because of COVID, but they were able to get James McAvoy like on green screen for that final scene. So that was like the closest they could do it, but it was supposed to be like a whole thing. But instead, so what they did was they just had like, you know, and I think like they just had characters being like, Azrael was doing this. Like, you know, or like this is what Azrael was doing while this was happening. But we were supposed to see it, which is, and they've said that I mean, to be fair, that's how the book did it too. So I mean, it would have been cool, but it was still true to the book. So at the end of the day, it's all good, I think.
Exactly. But I think like them as like the like showrunners and the creators, they wanted us as an audience to be able to like see that. So like not having the episode doesn't change anything, because it's like it was more for like fans to be like, this is what Azrael did, and now you get to like actually see what he was doing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh,
they
that's
said
interesting.
they're probably never going to film it because it's like it really was for season 2. It doesn't really make sense for it to go into season 3, but like who knows, maybe they will.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
I have
I don't
no
know.
idea what his big castle's gonna look like, because I
Yeah.
had a hard time picturing that in my brain. I'm like, I don't even know, but it's
Well,
gonna be
that's
cool.
the thing. It's like I just feel like there's so much like there's so much content that I need to stop saying material, but like there's so much content in Amber Spyglass that like I'll be surprised if they add anything. And if they do, like what could you add to that story that like feels like naturally added into it, because there's just so much going on and there's so much you have to like fit into the episodes. I hope it's a bit of a longer season. I hope it's like 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like there's just a bit more that you can flesh out into a couple extra episodes. So, but yeah, if they manage to add stuff to that season, I'll be like, like
go for it.
yeah, seriously, like kudos to you, because I don't know what you could possibly add to it that isn't already there, that isn't already like so exciting to see. But
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm like maybe 2 characters that I haven't met before that will meet that I have no idea. It's
Yeah.
gonna be good regardless, but like yeah.
I'm excited how they're gonna handle like the 2 angels. Like, is this gonna like, I don't know, are they gonna handle it well? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, well, because okay, there's like the big whole thing about how it's like, oh, the gay angels die, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
like, and I know that like obviously it's like, of course they do. Like,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, barrier
yeah,
gaze.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. But like, it's such a weird thing, because obviously, like when I was younger, I didn't know about that, and obviously I know about that now. But like, I don't want to be like, oh, like of course they died, but like of course they died. Like
of course they died.
Yeah, but like in the context of this story, like of course they died. Like
yeah,
especially, right? So I hope that people don't just like view it very much as like, oh yeah, bury your gays. But I'm like, yeah, like, but like a lot of people die in this too. Like it's not like
they're not the exception to the rule. You know? Yeah. In this situation, I think, I mean, again, controversial stuff, but like, it's very clear to me that when Philip Pullman wrote that, it wasn't like he
wasn't killing them off because they're gay, like that
exactly.
Type of,
yeah, and that's where I'm like, it's okay to do that in that situation, because that's not the point that he's making.
Yeah, it wasn't at all. Like, I mean, like tons of people die, like tons.
Lots of people die.
And like also Azrael and like Marisa die, so like
yeah, it's like, it's a whole thing. Yeah, like hardly anybody comes out of it. So yeah.
I think what I'm assuming is going to be one of the biggest criticisms of like Azrael and Marisa's death is that they're gonna like, because people do see that scene, and I've read this on like forums and like I've seen it on reviews and stuff. A lot of people view that as like their redemption. I'm like, but it's not. Like they no. I'm like, and that's like a big thing about that scene too, is that like most of the time when people do like a huge sacrifice like that, like when characters do a huge sacrifice, it is usually like this is them redeeming themselves from like previous actions or whatever it is. I'm like, yeah, but like no, like that's
because the reason why both of them did it is because they were so like crazed about whatever direction they were going in.
Exactly.
Like they were good directions.
Yeah, they were selfishly doing what they did. It had nothing like the greater good or like
no
like like for a good reason, like, and that's why like that's like super important about that, and I really hope they get that across. Like I hope leading up to it that both characters, like they've expressed in the show how awful they really are, that like people are like, no, like you should feel sad when like Lee Scoresby dies, like, and when he does in the show, like you should feel that. Also, I can't wait for like Yorick to like eat him. I think
that was a scene where I read it and I had to put the book down.
Yeah,
so
it's like
what?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite, like not favorite scenes, but it's always like one that's stuck in my mind, that he was like, like Lee would have wanted like to be able to still help you, and I need strength, so I'm just gonna eat Lee.
Yeah, it's such a like a cultural thing too, though. It kind of like throws you back, and it's like, oh, I guess in the Bears culture that completely makes sense, but I'm
Mhm.
not primed for that. So I'm having this shocked, but it does make sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
No,
it
it
was
does
one of
make
those
sense.
moments. Yeah.
I really hope they keep it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't be like completely disappointed if they get rid of it, but I always remember it. A lot of the memorable things have to do with like polar bears because it's just such a big thing. I mean, like the like the single combat is so cool. Like
Oh
I
my
just
God,
like when
yeah.
you read that, you're just like, oh my gosh. And then when you know that you're like gonna see it, I'm really sad because like I actually think like the movie version was better but
Mhm.
that's because like with the TV show they had to like limit their budget because there was so much CGI that there was just like
Yeah.
the bear fight isn't as epic as I wanted it to be in the TV show. Not that it's bad, but like obviously there
Mhm.
was a point where they like ran out of like money and they were like we can only do so much. But that's what's like so great about season 2 is that like there doesn't have to be as many demons on screen like there is in season 1, that like when you get a lot of the scenes where characters are with their demons, they're really really good. Like all of the Lee Hester stuff is so good in season 2.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Or just like any of the Lyra Pan stuff and like sorry obviously
No,
they
you're good.
decided obviously they decided that Pan would be like a red panda, which is really cute. That was such a cool
I love
choice.
that. And then when he was like talking with Will and touching his bloody stumps
Yeah,
of
yeah,
his
yeah.
hand. Yeah, that
It's
was
so
super
cute.
cool.
I also love that in season 2 they did like a little nod to Daphne and they had like Pan as a Wolverine. I was like, nice. Like,
Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
I remember when I saw that scene too, I was like, well done. Like, yeah.
That reminds me, one of the bonus scenes when Mary comes into the world with the specters and the little girls, and they're like, you know, throughout the book, they're like these huge bullies, right? And like they're like doing, it's like, wow, these children are doing terrible things. This is wild. And then they see an adult and they just like melt in front of her immediately.
Well, that's
which is
like
crazy.
That's such a great thing too. And actually, Jack Thorne talked about why he added that scene, because someone asked her like, why did you let those two girls have kind of like a better ending? Because like you were saying, like they're really big bullies like in the book and even in the show, like they're, you know,
they're not good.
And then right. And then he was saying, he's like, because they're kids and what happened to them was actually awful. So like they're just trying to like figure out how to survive right now. And it's like for him, he was like, it just makes sense that like we got something for them, like they had something to look forward to. And I was like, that's really cool. Like, and then like, and he was like, and of course like Mary would be that character to do that for them. And I was like, yeah, that checks out. Yeah. Like, yeah. And again, this is like, they really understand these characters. It's like to add that in, it is truly like, okay, you understand like what Mary's role is. And it also just kind of gives, that is also a little bit of, in a way, foreshadowing of like kind of what her role is too, because
she has to overall act like that with Will and Lyra later, kind of. With the in the Mjolfa world.
Whatever. We'll find out.
Fancy world.
Watch it be pronounced like completely different from either.
Oh yeah, we're gonna be like
great. Like, well, because it was like it's even how like Pantalaimon was pronounced. I did not say it that way when I was a kid.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, it was like Pantalaimon, Pantalama. I don't know.
So I was like Pan. Yes. Okay.
Pan is good.
Yeah. But yeah, so like that is another like small added scene that just it helps with Mary's character. And it's also like, again, it's like having like girls and women interact. Like it's another just thing that you don't see in the series. So it's like any added stuff that they did with that was like great. Well, even in season 1, and this is like Jack's writing too, they like gave Ma Costa a bit more, like just a little bit more. Like she definitely still has that role in the book, but like there's a couple extra like scenes between her and Lyra which were really great. So like
I love Costa. Love her. One of the good ones.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Like it's when you when you have a character like Marisa Coulter, it's like you can't have like every other female character be that awful. Otherwise, then you're just like what are you trying to say here, Philip? Like, are you just all awful? Like, yeah. But yeah, so I don't know, like we've been talking for like 2 hours now, so like, it's just like, yeah.
That's good.
I'll kind of like wrap it up, sort of, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, that
I
sounds
don't,
good.
yeah, I don't know, like, are there any like, you know, final thoughts that you want to say? Like, I know we covered like a lot of things, so
Yeah, I guess my final end of the day thought, this is definitely my favorite book series, period now. Like, I'm just gonna put that out there.
Yeah.
It was really good to read. Definitely at a good time in my life too, because I feel like I'm understanding things now.
mhm,
And like, just from a writing perspective, like, I'm just blown away
yeah,
by what Philip Pullman can do. And like, I don't like to say like, oh, I look up to this person, but like, I'm like, man, if I can get to his level one day when I'm like 60, that would be the dream. Like, this guy's just good. And I don't know, yeah, it's been good.
yeah,
I guess that's my final thought.
yeah. No, I think like, yeah, I mean, like, this is my like favorite book series, and it has been for like almost 20 years now, so like I like
Yeah.
you know, like and it, my love for it continues to grow, especially because there's a TV show, and now that, like, you know, I'm meeting people that are starting to read it for the first time and
Yeah.
starting to enjoy it. I'm like, oh yes, like, come join me. I've been like
Yeah.
waiting 20 years for this. It's like everything I like is from like 20 years ago, but like no one liked it at the time. So I'm just like, can you please, like, I'm like,
Let's
fantastic.
have
I've
a
been
renaissance.
yes, yeah.
A
So I'm
historic
like,
materials renaissance.
yeah,
Let's go.
exactly. So I'm just like waiting. I've been waiting 20 years to like get into this. So it's yeah, I don't even think like we fully talked about everything because like it's endless. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna
you go on forever.
like, honestly, like, most likely I'm gonna ask you to come back for another episode when we'll talk about something
Okay.
else, because like,
That sounds great.
yeah, like, honestly, like, I could talk about it for hours. Like, there's so many things. But yeah, so first of all, like,
Yeah.
or last of all, I guess, but like, thank you so much for joining me, because it's been great to just like have someone to actually just like talk about it with.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. It's my first podcast.
Yeah, and I
so
know we
exciting.
had some like technical difficulties, but that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
And just, yeah, just as well, I will, like, if you'd like, I would gladly have you back to talk more about this, because I know there's like other things, and obviously when season 3 comes out, like, I feel like there's gonna be so much to talk about, and when you read the new books too, like, there's gonna be even more to talk about. So yes, definitely, if you're down for it, then definitely I would love you to come back, and we'll continue this wonderful chat about this.
Yeah, 100%. I'm in for the ride.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah, so and for all the listeners, if you've made it, this is going to be my longest episode that I've had, because all of them have been under an hour. So if you've stuck with us and you've listened to us ramble on about this, thank you for staying, and thank you for joining me for multiple episodes if you've been here since day one of this. And hopefully this is going to be a bit more of a common thing where I have more guests on. I have asked a couple more people to kind of just be on the show and talk about different things, but again, so thank you for listening, and I will see you. I always say see you, but that's not a thing. Hope you guys all come back and listen, and if you haven't already, just subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow on Twitter, and I will add all of our handles and everything on the description. It'll be below somewhere. But you know, I'm still getting used to this like YouTube thing, because I've never posted stuff on YouTube for a podcast. It's always just been audio. So yeah, but again, thank you, Emily, for joining me, and yeah, thank you,
Thanks
everyone. Yeah, of course. And thank you, everyone, for listening. This is Dash of Chaos, and I will see you next time.